there's this strange conversation that Jesus has with one of the most important figures in his world, an authority figure, a politician, a governor, actually. And it's one of those conversations that has so much underneath that sometimes we don't really kind of catch. And as we've been going through this series of conversations with Jesus and how those conversations have the potential to rewire the way we think, John uses this conversation to bring his point to a very climatic moment. It's right before Jesus gets crucified, and it's a conversation that has the theme of truth, the theme of kingdom, and the theme of just like suffering and what Jesus is going to go through clashing at that moment. So when we read this conversation, keep that in the back of your head. Keep those thoughts and those themes that you've been reading through the book of John in the back of your head. So we're going to read it in John chapter 18. I'm going to start reading from verse 33. Pilate went back into the praetorium and he called for Jesus. He asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews? Are you saying this on your own?" Jesus answered, "Or did others tell you about me?" Pilate answered, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and ruling priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my servants would be fighting so that I wouldn't be handed over to the Judean leaders. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." So Pilate answered him, "Are you a king then?" And Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. For this reason I was born, and for this reason I came into the world, so that I might testify to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" What is truth? That's a question that we should all be asking ourselves. And we live in a world where truth is pretty much defined by your own perspective, that there's no absolute to it, and whatever you feel or whatever you're experiencing or whatever perspective you have, that is truth for you, and it doesn't have to be truth for somebody else. So what is truth really? It's a question that I think we as a generation are struggling to answer. That no matter what answer we give, people don't seem to be satisfied. If we say there's an absolute truth, people think we're too hard-line. But if we go all the way to this fact to say that there is no absolute truth, we're making an absolute statement. How can we make an absolute statement if there is no absolutes, right? And it's just not consistent with reality. And I heard this definition one time, that truth is that which is coherent and consistent with reality. So what is going on around you, that is what is truth. It might work for some people, it might not. If you ask Jesus what truth is, he would define truth as a person. He said in John chapter 14 that truth is him. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me." So is truth a person? Is truth what corresponds to reality? Is truth a matter of perspective? That's exactly the theme that John is trying to tell us all along. And it's reaching its climax in this moment, in this conversation with Pilate. What does Pilate represent? Well, Pilate represents any kingdom or system of the world, anything that the world tries to put there as a facade in trying to let us know how to live and what kind of worldview we should hold. Pilate is this representation of the kingdoms of the world. And he has a conversation with the one and only king, the king that represents the kingdom of God and everything that God is for. And it's this clashing on kingdoms right in this conversation. And it seems so subtle and you might not read it there, but Pilate is threatened. If this guy is a king, the way that people say that he is, or the way Jews expect him to be, then this guy's gonna overthrow him and entire Rome. Because that's the Jewish expectation, that the Messiah would come to free Jews from the captivity and slavery of the Romans. So as he is having this conversation, he wants to make sure that this guy is not a rebel, a zealous Jew who wants to lead an army to it. Because if he is one of those guys, then of course he's going to put him to death. But what shocks Pilate so much is that Jesus is not about that. He says it very, very clearly in verse 36. My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom doesn't come from this world. This is not about fighting and bearing arms and trying to get our fix because you took it away from us. Jesus very clearly says that his kingdom is not from this world. But what we need to understand is that his kingdom is for this world. It's not from here. It doesn't operate by the rules and regulations that this world kind of has been accustomed to. But it's for this world because it's trying to bring restoration and justice and bring and set things right the way that they were not. Jesus is trying to make it very clear that he is the king, but not the king that we expect. So because that doesn't make any sense, Pilate keeps on asking questions, and he comes to this point where he says, what is truth? He just doesn't seem to get it. Because the difference between the kingdoms of the world and the kingdom of God is that the kingdom of God operates by truth. And the kingdoms of the world operate by their own redefinition of whatever that is. The kingdom of God doesn't operate by violence and weaponry, but rather by truth. In the kingdoms of the world, because they constantly redefine what truth is, they use whatever mechanism they need to in order to advance and promote their own ideas. This is the clash of kingdoms. This is the moment where God is fighting evil in one conversation. And then the enactment of this act is going to be Jesus at the cross. And you know about that story. But what is important for us to realize right now is that Jesus very clearly, through this conversation, is making Pilate and is making you and I understand that the kingdom of God operates in truth. And that is what he says at the end. It says, I testify to the truth, and everyone who is of the truth hears my voice. Jesus knows that those who are of him, who get it, who understand what truth is, will operate in this way. I hope this is making you think a little bit about what truth is and the way that we live our lives. And I hope that as you read the story, you read it more than just a conversation. You read it as maybe the worldview of this world clashing with the worldview of God, because that's what this conversation is trying to do. But I have a person that is far smarter than I who wrote this. N.T. Wright, in his book, How God Became King, says this about truth. The point about truth and about Jesus and his followers bearing witness to it is that truth is what happens when humans use words to reflect God's wise ordering of the world, and so shine light into its darkness, bringing judgment and mercy where it's badly needed. Empires can't cope with this. They make their own truth, creating facts on the ground in the depressing normally way of violence and injustice. Truth is what Jesus and his followers bear witness to. Did you catch that? Truth is what happens when humans use words to reflect God's wise ordering of the world. And that way they shine light into darkness. Truth is what Jesus is, and truth is what disciples of Jesus are all about. His truth, his wisdom, his understanding, his worldview. This is what truth is all about. And when we choose to live by it, to know it, to uphold it, we're reflecting God's good wisdom onto the world. And in a sense, we're finally shining the light into the darkness that this world keeps on operating by. This world will continue to make facts out of nowhere. Will continue to redefine truth in its own way. Will continue to redefine wisdom, to choose what good is and what bad is. They will do that. The world will continuously do that. But if we're going to be the image bearers of God, those who are following Jesus the way that he calls us to be, we'll understand that we are no longer operating by the truth that this world has set for us. But we are now understanding who is truth and we reflect His truth, His wisdom, His understanding, His definition to wherever we do, wherever we go, and whoever we meet. Those who know the truth will hear His voice. So the question that you and I have to ask is not what is truth. We know what truth is. The question you and I have to ask is, do I want to follow this truth? Do I hear His voice?